Mainstream media outlets stereotype the religious other as the enemy through creating fear and playing into common stereotypes held by the West. This is done through the use of rhetoric, tone, and various types of imagery.
Modern media portrays the other, which entails Muslims, the religion of Islam, and people of the Middle East in a negative light. To understand the drastic negative portrayal of the other in the media, here are some facts. The news showed Muslims as the aggressors in war and in conflict 80% of the time. Furthermore, over 40% of the time, descriptive references attached to the word Muslim or Islamic were derogatory. These words included militant, fundamentalist, extremist, or terrorist. Another study from 2007 found that 91% of articles and stories in the newspapers about Muslims were negative.
Kavanaugh separates our violence from their violence. Our violence is rational and necessary, whereas their violence, being tainted by religion, is uncontrolled, absolutist, fanatical, irrational, and divisive. This distinct separation and condemnation of violence plays directly into the idea of fear-mongering in the media. Fear-mongering is the action of deliberately arousing public fear or alarm about a particular issue. Fear is developed in our social discourse through the media's use of rhetoric and tone in their news broadcasts.
Joining us is one such voice, Brigitte Gabriel, author of, and I quote, "They Must Be Stopped."
Just the title of Gabriel's book, They Must Be Stopped, is problematic because not only does it refer to an entire nation of people with the singular and vague word they, but it's creating a fear imperative saying that there's a threat that needs to be dealt with immediately, and essentially it's exaggerating a problem.
And I want to quote something you said in this article, so I apologize for putting on my glasses, but you said, "America has been infiltrated on all levels by radicals who wish to harm America. They have infiltrated us at the CIA, at the FBI, at the Pentagon, at the State Department. They're being radicalized in radical mosques in our cities and communities within the United States."
For the remainder of this interview, Brigitte Gabriel is unable to give definite proof or the names of any certain individuals to back up her allegations that radical Islam has infiltrated the United States on a fundamental level. So to me, that is a perfect example of people making outlandish allegations in order to inspire fear and mobilize opposition against the religious other.
It's a difference between civilization and barbarism. It's a difference between goodness and evil. And this is what we're witnessing in the Arabic world. They have no soul. They are dead set on killing and destruction.
The use of trigger words in the last clip develops fear, and then her use of generalizations also leads to a development of fear. How can she possibly generalize between the good of the West and the evil of the Middle East? She can't possibly know all the Islams in the whole entire world to form these generalizations.
There is no radical Islam and moderate Islam. There's only one Islam. Believe what your enemy, at least what the radicals are saying, because it is the radicals right now that matter, and it is the radicals who have declared war on the United States.
So basically in this clip, Brigitte Gabriel is stating at first that there is one Islam, there aren't any distinctions among its members. But then about 10 seconds later, she starts creating a distinction between the radicals and everybody else. She starts using the word radicals as a trigger word.
The tactic of fear-mongering is abundantly clear in Gabriel's side of the conversation.
Whereas characters such as Gabrielle are animated, even insidious in her clip, Bill O'Reilly in this clip adopts an entirely different tone in order to get his message across. His demeanor seems to imply that he is only recounting facts and that there is nothing outrageous or extreme about his views. Essentially, we ought to trust him.
Well, intelligence sources tell us at the Factor that they were intensely advising President Obama a year ago. And obviously now it's a threat to the world. And since the world is largely cowardly, the United States has to lead the way to try to, degrade these people and wipe them out.
So this clip starts out with Bill O'Reilly saying that he's been informed by intelligence sources at the O'Reilly Factor. I don't know what intelligence sources are, and he doesn't specifically name these sources. What he goes on to say is that the main problem concerning the world being faced with this threat of ISIS is that we're not meeting them with our own violence quickly enough. We're not mobilizing troops to engage them physically.
What's killing the West now in this fight on terror, and Putin as well, is the politics of it. Can't get anything done quickly, can't mobilize fast. So it's going to happen. This anti-terror army is going to happen.
Why do you always say that? Why do you say all the things you say, Bill, with such certainty?
Because I'm always right, Gail. There's a trajectory of worldwide terrorism that has to be confronted. Everybody knows it has to be confronted. Yet they dither and they dally and they delay and they obfuscate, and it's got to stop. Or we're going to have more beheadings. We're going to have a beheading every day.
So here's just a clear example of fear-mongering. Basically, Bill O'Reilly is just saying that the beheadings are going to increase until we have them every day. Like, we're going to see more of the James Foley-style beheadings every 24 hours. And this is just a bunch of bull. This was probably shot a little bit ago, a couple weeks, a month ago. Have we progressed that far? No, this is just fear-mongering.
But this makes my point. These guys, there's just a million of them. They just pop up, whether it's Yemen or Somalia or here or there, and you just can't have this unwieldy apparatus saying, well, maybe we'll get them, but maybe we have to go over here. You have to have a central command, an authority to fight worldwide terrorism, and we don't have it now. And I don't think we have the will yet. It's going to take another 9/11 attack for the world to get the will.
Bill is trying to connect emotionally with the audience. He is using the example of 9/11, an image that is still so fresh in American people's minds, to make people care and interested in the subject. But in reality, all he is doing is creating fear. Another reason he chose 9/11 is performance violence. 9/11 is an image that stays in people's minds, and thus perpetuates the violence.
Ben, we have to be able to criticize bad ideas. And
of course we do. No liberal doesn't want to criticize bad
ideas. But Islam at this moment is the motherlode of bad ideas.
Jesus.
So they also keep women and homosexuals immiserated in these cultures, and we have to empower the true reformers in the Muslim world to change it.
So, contrary to what the speaker seems to be trying to get across right here, these problems of mistreatment of homosexuals and of women and infringement upon human rights in general is not something that's unique to Islam. Regardless, since Islam is being talked about, I think it's important to note that what this guy is saying definitely is reminiscent of themes of cultural imperialism. He's saying that we, out of necessity, have to empower the reformers and what we deem to be more moderate or humanistic among Islamists, rather, and so that we can change Islam on a whole in maybe a more westernized vision.
One reason they don't get exposed is because they're afraid to speak out, because it's the only religion that acts like the mafia, that will fucking kill you if you say the wrong thing, draw the wrong picture, or write the wrong book.
Bill Maher uses certain buzzwords to paint such a violent picture, and is using generalizations that only present a certain point of view and therefore does not get the other side of the story across. He's usually using generalizations about Muslims that just are wild and violent and painting a very negative picture.
But you also have other braver souls out there who do speak out. But where was the coverage? Where was that story to sort of create a different picture?
Michael Steele here actually makes a very interesting and valid point in that the media is somehow motivated to create this distorted reality that only fanatics exist. To be fair, fanatics do exist in every single religion and faith, but they're not all of them. And the media, by creating this distorted reality, is essentially sensationalizing and delegitimizing those religions. Essentially, they're not telling the whole story. And if we were to put ourselves in their shoes, then we would also feel, what's the word? I'm going to hand it over to Russell Peters.
But they never show you those Arabs on TV because they're boring. They only show you the crazy. Basically, all they're showing you of the Arab world are the rednecks of the Arab world.
But you're treating them like a minority. I mean, if Filipinos were capturing teenagers and sending them into white slavery, we would criticize that. We wouldn't say, well, they're Filipinos.
You would criticize the people who are doing it, not the Philippines.
In this clip, Ben Affleck clearly shows the problem that media outlets are now trying to do, which is that through the microscopic lens that they place on these extremists, they're trying to enlarge that microscopic lens so that people think the entire institution is the same and they behave the same way. And this is misinformation, this is generalization, and this is stereotype. And Ben Affleck very clearly points out that these flaws do cut across political lines. So far, we've seen the use of rhetoric in snippets of clips, But what if an entire conversation is driven by the use of words and the choice of questions that are being asked? And that is a use of rhetoric and use of words so that the media can enforce their bias on you as the audience.
But you're trying to talk about moderation within the faith, and I'm trying to figure out who you are and what you believe. Let me just do a few. Do you believe that Al-Qaeda committed 9/11? Do you believe that?
Yes, I believe Al-Qaeda committed 9/11.
Okay, and do you condemn Hamas? Okay, and there's no doubt in your mind that Osama bin Laden was behind 9/11. Would you shake hands with a woman?
Fear-mongering is very prevalent in rhetoric and tone. Specific buzzwords, generalizations, the use of us versus them, emotive speech, calm tones, etc., all play a large role in how the media plays into our ideas of the other. These stereotypes and negative portrayals of the other are shown in conservative media outlets, liberal outlets, and with comedians and other famous people. The fear-mongering of media knows no bounds. This tactic of targeting the other unfortunately does not end with the media's use of rhetoric and tone, but is also used in what images the media outlets decide to use.
The so-called Islamic State now stretches over huge swaths of Syria and Iraq. It has heavy weapons, American-made ones, stolen from the Iraqi army. And ISIS is imposing its medieval interpretation of Islamic law. Yet many are rushing to become citizens of this barbaric nation.
This clip from NBC News is a prime example of building off of what we just talked about with rhetoric, but now adding in visual images. This video starts out playing into the stereotypes that many Americans likely hold of the Muslim world. So fear of the unknown is going to likely be prevalent.
The last voice James Foley heard was of his murderer, with what some say sounds like a British accent.
This is James Wright Foley, an American citizen of your country.
You know, this is exactly what ISIS wanted when they beheaded James Foley and released a video clip of it. They wanted it to be broadcasted on all the major American news outlets, and they wanted us to be scared. They knew that our news outlets would be willing to air it because it's shocking and that's how they get views. And all it's doing is really helping ISIS assume this position as a feared and powerful entity.
Security officials say ISIS has between 7,000 and 12,000 foreign fighters, hundreds from Europe, and one known American.
This clip is a perfect example of when media uses both imagery and rhetoric to get their points across. And this clip specifically, you see ISIS fighters carrying weapons and guns at the back of their trucks. At the same time, the commentator is telling you all these statistics about the fighting regime and all these figures. And together, they really give the impression that they're large, they're intimidating, and they're really a presence to be acknowledged. And this is something that Kavanaugh has talked about, where the Western societies are very civilized and that other is not. At the end of the clip, actually, you get a very short imagery of a bomb going off in the middle of a town. There was no acknowledgement by the commentator that this was actually carried out by ISIS.
Doesn't it feel like every time you turn on the news nowadays, some new country is fucking with an Arab country? Every time you turn on the news, I kind of blame the media for what's going on wrong in the world right now, because they kind of just perpetuate stereotypes about people. What they do is they'll show you an image of somebody of a different racial background, and then they'll show you an alternate image, like right away, of something completely different. They don't say the two images are together. They kind of present it like, what do you think?
This new and very glossy recruitment video, which looks professionally shot and edited, was produced by ISIS in English. It's tailor-made to appeal to Americans and other Western jihadists. It features a 20-year-old British medical student who's traveled to Syria to wage jihad.
What prevents you from attaining martyrdom and the pleasure of your Lord? Look around you while you sit in comfort and ask yourself, is this how you want to die?
So this CNN clip provides quite a contrast from the focus of the NBC clip. The CNN clip shows two jihadists from ISIS talking in English and allows the viewer to put a face to the ISIS organization.
ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim.
I can tell you with confidence that ISIL speaks for Islam. Allow me to correct you, Mr. President. ISIL is a Muslim organization. Its name stands for Islamic State. So even the name suggests that it is an Islamic movement.
So the conversation being had on this television program isn't even about whether or not Islam is violent or how violent certain sectors of Islam are. This conversation is actually about whether or not the entity in question is an Islamic group or not, explicitly. Yet still the only images being shown and the only footage being shown is of a violent militant Islam, with guns and convoys and the like.
Former Muslim Noni Darwish says it all leads to the ultimate goal stated in the Quran.
So in this clip, one thing that CBN does is they time the imagery to the points that she's making. She also states that they're going to take over the world in large numbers, and we see the giant militia group. We also see a car up in flames, gunmen shooting cars again from another moving vehicle, and it's attributed to ISIS without us actually knowing if that's really ISIS committing the violence.
It is true that that Islam is not ISIS, but it is also true that ISIS is Islamic, is it not?
In this clip, Megyn Kelly from Fox News is having a discussion with Shibli, who is telling people ISIS does not represent all of Islam. And yet, halfway through the Fox News discussion, there's imagery being injected into their conversation that show militants, convoys, weapons, basically imagery that invoke the idea of violence. And that really undermines and contradicts the Shibli's thesis, essentially that really we shouldn't be stereotyping and generalizing the entire Islam based on a couple extremist acts. And by doing so, Fox News is actually distracting you away from the conversation that they're having to these images, and through that, they're subconsciously making you connect the fact that ISIS is actually violent through the use of those imagery.
Imagery is a powerful tactic used by media outlets to help their message get across to the viewers. In the case of portraying the other, the message is to create fear. The images that roll across the screen are of stereotypical Middle Eastern scenes, which reinforce our generalizations. They are of violence and guns rather than everyday lives. They are of moments of conflict rather than moments of peace. The imagery reinforces what the rhetoric is saying. It gives the rhetoric oomph. In this case, the rhetoric used is aimed at negatively portraying the other.
But now, this is close. The simple truth, we are not prepared, and certainly not ready. Lone wolves arrested in Washington State, Rochester, New York, and Colorado. I've been telling you for months that you need to be afraid.
So this clip from the Judge Jeanine Pirro show is a very good example of combining imagery and rhetoric to make an even stronger point, which is something Pirro does really well. So through this clip that we just saw, she's trying to frame the conflict with ISIS as closer to home by showing pictures of three average, ordinary-looking individuals, and through emphasizing words such as close to home or phrases such as close to home, she's trying to make this conflict seem a lot closer to us than it actually is.
2 Americans beheaded by an English-speaking barbarian, a third a Brit, while a fourth is lined up for the most brutal, savage, end-of-life experience imaginable. These are not amateurs. They are experts at the systematic, pervasive torture, mass killings, rape, public crucifixions, beheadings, some even videotaped and used as a propaganda tool to entice those who believe in evil and want to impose hell on the rest of us under the guise of their God.
So in this clip, Pirro is really trying to scare us about ISIS. She goes through a laundry list of things that she says ISIS is trained in and will do to the general public: rape, public crucifixions, all these things. We're not exactly sure how she knows exactly what ISIS militants are trained in, but she claims to know. There's even audio going on in the background of guns firing. We're not sure if this footage and this audio is even of ISIS militants specifically, but obviously it serves to get across her purpose of trying to scare everybody.
And think Boston, as in Boston bombers. 2 brothers, one a teen, here on asylum as victims of another country. We do everything for them. And when another country calls to tell us not once but twice that they're a terror risk, our FBI investigates and concludes that they're not.
In this clip, Judge Pirro actually goes on a rant about things that are completely unrelated to ISIS. But more importantly, she showed the 2 images of the 2 Boston bombers that the national audience are very familiar with, because at the time of the Boston bombing, those 2 pictures were all over the internet. And by seeing that, audience would directly connect it with a sense of fear. And for purpose unknown to us, Piros is using that argument and using that fear in relation to her argument against ISIS. The 2 topics are completely irrelevant and unrelated, but yet she's using those images and using the words of fear and things to that nature to connect them to ISIS to further achieve her message of creating that enemy and the enemy of the other.
As we have just seen, Fox News is filled with passionate rhetoric and imagery regarding ISIS, Muslims, Arabs, and the Islamic religion. Russell Brand exposes Fox News' approach to fear-mongering while also exploring this topic himself through his own analysis.
Americans have shed enough blood there. My resolution? Airstrikes. Bomb them. Bomb them. Keep bombing them. Bomb them again and again.
Fucking hell, Justice Janine. Bomb them. She's pointing everything. Bomb them. When they do these bombings, it creates more insurgents. That's what creates them.
They measure their performance by the number of deaths.
I mean, really, you're just making stuff that foreign people do sound worse. Like, America does have armies, does have trained killers that they unleash to meet their objectives. So does Britain. So does everybody. That's the rules of the game.
Brand's criticism of Pirro here is reminiscent of our readings of Kavanaugh, because Pirro is taking issue with violence perpetrated by the East and against the West, and not at all with violence perpetrated by the West and against the East. This is all based on the assumption that violence perpetrated by us against the other must be justified because it's based on our inherently righteous principles.
Brand's comical analysis of Judge Pirro exposed the nature of fear-mongering on Fox News. Brand exposed the use of the tactic of labeling us versus them. This mentality is used to alienate the other and rally zeal against them. Brand's analysis of Fox News proves the point that the media negatively portrays the other. To help get our point across, this is what Russell Brand has to say.
ISIS is a fanatical religious terrorist organization.
So's Fox News. He's a fanatical terrorist propagandist organisation. She's a savage. She's espousing savage values.
Russell Brand isn't the only one who thinks this way about Fox News. Stand-up comic Gabriel Iglesias tells you about his experiences in Saudi Arabia.
Please, when you return to United States or wherever you travel, let the people know what you saw, okay? Let them know that we are not all bad, that we are not all those bad people from Fox News, okay? He has a bomb, he has a bomb, he has a bomb. Oprah is here giving away bombs to everybody. Everybody has a bomb.
Fox News has been one of the main outlets we have analyzed to look at the role of fear-mongering in our modern media. Iglesias and Brand pointed out how problematic Fox is. Other media outlets are not innocent either, though. Most of our media outlets portray the other quite negatively.
This project is important because the use of fear-mongering is prevalent and has several important uses. First, fear-mongering is used to sell the product. Fear sells the news and drives up ratings.
Fear distorts our views and perpetuates the status quo. The U.S. uses this tactic of fear-mongering of the other to help justify its actions and involvement in the Middle East. As Professor Mander pointed out in lecture, media works in conjunction with the government. The government needs the media to portray an identifiable enemy to help control the populace. Lastly, the portrayal of the other has very real political implications. This can be seen in profiling, security restrictions, overt discrimination, and so forth.
As shown in our project, the use of rhetoric and imagery in modern news and media perpetuates fear, assumptions, and stereotypes about those different from us.
Clock is running.
Sorry.
It's been
He's
running.
gonna have to cut it.
I'm gonna be cutting it. Shall we squeeze it in a little bit?
Here we go.
There we go.
Perfect. Cozy.